Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. Somebody said in one of the comments once, I like how Keri always looks surprised when the show starts. I am often surprised because there's probably something weird happening on my tech side, and I currently produce the show myself without a producer, which I'm looking for a producer. So if that's something you're interested in, hit me up at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com. Um, anyway, sorry about that little technical snafu. I'm here. I hope you're having a good October 16th. October, the best month. And I'm glad to have you. I see some familiar faces in the chat. If you're new here, this is a live show that we do on Mondays and Fridays at 1 o'clock Central. We just talk about what's in the news, what's on our mind, what's on my mind. Sometimes we take, suggestions from the chat. And sometimes we have guests. So on Friday, if you missed it, I had a special guest, Obaid Omer from the Dangerous Speech podcast, and he came on to talk about Islam and woke and his experiences leaving Islam, discovering what woke is, rejecting woke, and then also to offer his perspective on why we see so many woke people, woke organizations like BLM openly supporting Hamas, openly supporting terrorism. And it was really interesting speaking with him. He's a really intelligent guy. So I would say go check that one out from Friday if you haven't seen it yet. Today, I'm doing it alone. I just wanted to talk about some thoughts I had and see what you guys are thinking. And no guest today. Whose birthday is it? Kat's? Kat says, today's my birthday. Happy birthday, Kat says. So many people have October birthdays. Actually, I think today is Obaid's birthday, also the guest from Friday. So if you follow him on social media, tell him happy birthday. Happy birthday, Kat. October's the best month for birthdays. I'm biased, but I think it's there's a lot of October birthdays, maybe because parents were getting it on for Valentine's Day. Would that be the right timing to have babies in October? That might be a reason. Anyway, happy birthday. So, oh, look, Therese. Hey, Therese. Crazy week here. My husband's birthday's Wednesday. See, so many birthdays. And he's having hip surgery Thursday. Well, if you guys pray, say a prayer for Therese's husband. If you don't pray, do a push-up. That's usually what we say. I'm kidding. You don't have to push up. So I don't know how you guys are feeling. You can let me know in the chat, let me know in the comments, but I'm a little distracted, more than usual this week because I've been reading so much about what's happening in Israel and Gaza and reading so many different opinions and learning a lot actually, which is learning some things I didn't know, which is great, but also trying to absorb and take in all these different positions. And as some have noticed, if you are highly active online, if you are on Twitter especially, you'll notice there are a lot of people who were previously mostly in agreement on at least the cultural things here in the West or in the US, in agreement on things having to do with woke ideology being a bad thing, or in agreement on things like COVID policy and authoritarian government policies, like saying you have to get a particular medical procedure, or saying that you have to wear a mask to go outside and things like that, or the government saying you can't go to work or you can't operate your small business. So people who were previously in agreement on a lot of things like that, who are now not just disagreeing, but vehemently, and sometimes I would say highly emotionally and in a nasty way, disagreeing and impugning one another's motives, attacking each other's character, unfollowing and unfriending one another. And so there's a lot of that happening on X or Twitter if you're online. So that's kind of trying to figure that out and watching people who maybe are not behaving as the best version of themselves is sometimes distressing. Um, I had a couple thoughts. I don't know which order to put them in. I'll try to organize them. And one thought was, I'm very grateful. I should probably share more often when I have moments of gratitude about my faith, my Christian faith. I don't do it as often as I should. I do it in my private life with my husband or with friends. But in times like this of upheaval and uncertainty and war and being able to watch and see like the great evil that we humans are capable of, and to see that unfold from across the world, I'm very grateful for my Christian faith. There are practical, very, very great practical benefits of being a believer. And one of those is I have a calmness about me and a peace about me that I never had before I was a believer. I noticed the difference. Instead of having a background anxiety, like when I was a social justice woke person, sort of had this background anxiety all the time. I know a lot of people who are in woke who have that background anxiety. And instead of having that, I have like a background peace, no matter how bad things are getting, whether that's in my personal life or on the world stage. There's this bedrock of certainty and um, I don't know, just peace. That's the best word. This bedrock of peace that exists that I didn't have before, and it's a noticeable difference. And so I'm grateful for that. And I was talking about it with some friends of mine at church yesterday about having that feeling, and I think I probably noticed it because when there are very trying times happening, sometimes I notice some of my atheist friends, it's like in relief. I notice it in relief to their reaction. So sometimes I have noticed atheist friends expressing publicly on social media and whatnot, or sometimes privately to me, but expressing this very lonely kind of hopelessness or not nihilism, but approaching, apathy sometimes or struggling with that and futility and and wishing for or maybe attaining in a different way acceptance and peace over what's happening. In some cases, attaining that in a different way. But I guess I've noticed it because of that difference, and I've even had not in this particular thing that's happening in Israel right now, but I've had in other situations, atheist friends say to me, "I wish I was a believer right now because I'm feeling kind of like everything's dark." And so I understand that because I used to be there, and I'm sorry that you have that, and I don't know how to help those people when they say that other than if you are someone who's at the stage where you want to believe, I think you're on the right path because desiring truth or belief, in my opinion, is the very first step to potentially getting there one day. And my pastor has shared his story before in parts of his story in some of his sermons. And he was an atheist for a long time, much of his adult life. And he did a sermon once where he talked about how for him it started with the desire for belief, but thinking that he couldn't ever become a believer, but desiring it. And he talks about this verse in the Bible where it says, "I believe, Lord, help me with my unbelief," which seems contradictory, but it's a great prayer to do if you're someone who's like, "I'm at the stage where I wish I did believe, but I don't think I could." If you're at that stage, that's the only person I'm talking to. I'm not talking to anyone who doesn't wanna believe. I'm not trying to tell you. I'm just if you are that non-believer who's like, "I wish I had that peace. I wish I could be a believer, but I don't have that in me," or whatever, just try that prayer for a while. Seriously, what could it hurt? You could just say, "I don't believe in you, God, but I'm trying this out. I wish I believed. Help me with my unbelief. However you want to phrase it. And I wish I had peace. If it's true that you are peace, God, bring that peace upon me. You could do something like that. So anyway, that was one thought that I had recently. Another thought I had is about seeing all these hot takes and tempers flaring and emotions flaring online. Is social media has created a lot of opportunities for people to connect and to make friends. I've made friends online who have become friends offline as well, and to share information across the world quickly. And but it's also contributed to some negative things, which we all know. And one of those things I think is that if people attain a modest following of some kind, or people paying attention to them or listening to them, any number of people, like myself, a modest following, I think it has the ability to mess with their ego sometimes, and maybe contribute to them losing perspective and getting their priorities out of whack, and maybe getting to a place where feeling like they have to have something to say or have a take on every issue is a driving force behind some of their behavior online. And I guess I was thinking about that phrase, "With great power comes great responsibility." You may know that phrase from, is it Spider-Man? But that's not where it originated. But I think in Spider-Man, that's where a lot of young people know that phrase. With great power comes great responsibility. So when it comes to online influencers, we get called, I hate that word. I am not an influencer. But I have been called that. When it comes to online influencers, I guess I would say with modest power comes modest responsibility. Is that true? Because a lot of people don't seem to feel like they have any responsibility to being confident about what they're saying, taking the time to figure out that what they're saying is something they really believe, or that it's not motivated by the spur of the moment or a high emotion. And uh, a- and 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 that's a shame, because I have seen in the past few weeks people, as I said, and as I'm sure you guys have seen, at each other's throats or posting things while under the spirit of high emotion. I actually saw someone apologize for it. I think it was I forget his first name, starts with a J, Pollock. You guys might know him. He's on the right. I think he used to write for Breitbart. Correct me if you guys know who I'm talking about in the chat. Let me know. But he, to his credit, posted an apology for whatever it was he had said in a spirit of high emotion. He posted a long and thoughtful apology for it and said, "I should have waited, and I should have, if I could, I would phrase it this way today." And it was much more nuanced. And I saw that apology and was like, good for him. More people should probably be doing that. And I say all this because I've been there. Maybe not on this issue, but I've been there on other issues where I just let emotion grip me, and then you say something that you didn't think through, or you regret later, or I've been there. And so I try not to go there again. And I wish more people would try not to go there. That's all. There's a Bible verse about this. This verse convicts me all the time. Maybe it will convict other people. I have to think about it all the time, especially when I feel justified in something. Here we go. This is from James 1, James 1:19 and 20. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. I've had to think about this a lot. It doesn't mean that anger's wrong, especially righteous anger. It just means be aware of when you're very quick to do something, when you're very quick to be moved by anger. If anger catches you and then in that moment you're wanting to do something, maybe slow down. I'm sure we've all had a moment we can interrogate ourselves and think back and say, "Oh yeah, I did that once. I did that once yesterday in a conversation with my husband." Like, then it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that way. I should have waited till I wasn't angry about that thing." You know? That's a human thing. And it can happen, in, your individual lives. It can happen on a large scale. And if you're someone with any modest degree of so-called influence or, power or what have you, I would say maybe try to have more than a modest amount of responsibility for what's coming out of your mouth and the kind of things that you're sharing. That's all. Um, okay. This relates to that second thought. This is the third thought. Let me see, I'm a very skeptical person now because I wasn't for over 20 years of my life. When I was in the woke cult, I had the skepticism beat out of me, metaphorically, not actually beat out of me. But, I didn't question my ideology. I wasn't allowed to. If I questioned it, it was internal and I pushed it down. Um, I did not question my side. I was one of those simplistic, leftist, woke people who thought my side's full of the good guys, the other side's the bad guys. And I believed the news, which is weird because I did not believe the news during the Iraq War. Because why? This is true for a lot of people on the left. If you're wondering, how was it they knew? How was it that they knew that they were following along, that they knew that the justification for the Iraq War was BS, that they were putting out propaganda and lying about yellow cake uranium and lying about babies in incubators and stuff. How was it that they knew? How is it that they knew that was false, but then they started trusting the media again? The answer is because during the Iraq War, the way in which the tribalism, the right left thing was divided up was, hey, it's a Republican in office, so the left is going to be skeptical and to criticize and to look at everything closely and pull it apart. That's why. It's because W was in office. If it had been Obama in office, the left, we wouldn't have paid attention. Or we would have outright supported the war. That's the way this stupid tribalism gets used. I'm talking about most people, not every person. I'm talking about the tribe, the mass, the group, the people that just follow along like I used to do with whatever the marching orders are. Once you find out where right left is supposedly on this issue, and then you just line up with your group. So I was very skeptical about the Iraq War, and I was following everything closely, and I did know that the 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 our three-letter agencies and the media were lying to push us into a war. Then Obama got in office, and it's like we forgot all of that on the left. It's like, "Oh, but the good guys are there now. We trust the media again. We trust the government again." Isn't that crazy? But it happened. It happened with me. And so after coming out of the 2 decades I spent in the woke cult, and especially after going through the past few years, the COVID years, I'm very skeptical, about anything the media tells me, anything the mainstream is pushing, anything the government tells me, and, I think it's in our best interest to be skeptical. So anybody who's skeptical about anything that's happening right now, good, you should be skeptical. You should ask questions. On the other hand, on the other hand, I don't share every skepticism that I have immediately on social media. especially if you have a modest following of some kind. I think it's just as irresponsible sometimes, as sharing every thing that comes out of the mouth of the media or the government that might turn out to be propaganda. So I've seen people who I think are naively or out of emotion or what have you sharing things that later turn out to be or might turn out to be propaganda and not true. But I've also seen people immediately sharing those same images and saying, "This is fake," or, expressing, high convoluted conspiracy theory stuff immediately. It's like, no, I have so many conspiracy theories. I don't post all of them online. That's just as reckless, I think, especially if it's a new and developing situation. So, I don't know. This thought might make everyone mad at me, but I think everybody just needs to slow their roll a bit and listen and read sources who you trust. Um, and also, well, and first of all, if you're trusting, if you, what the last person I'm going to go to for an opinion on what's happening in Israel is like your favorite drama tuber. I've seen some of that happening. I've seen Instagram influencers and drama tubers who have no expertise or background in this area who are now putting out like opinion videos about it because I guess that's the thing to do. It's like, no, that's not who I'm listening to. My husband is listening to he always likes to listen to people he disagrees with the most, but who he respects their intelligence because he wants to make sure he's not missing anything and I think that's a great practice to do. So, he's been listening to Max Blumenthal lately, who is got opinions that people may describe as to one extreme. But then he's also listening to people like Steve Bannon, who other people might say, "Oh, that's opinions to another extreme." But at least both those guys are highly intelligent, and whether or not you ultimately agree with anything they're saying, you're hearing an opinion from an informed source. So, um, yeah. Dan Trainer, trust in God. Yeah, God is the only person I trust. Not a person, but the only person I fully trust. There are people I trust, absolutely, but in terms of infallible, who's infallible? In my opinion, no one but God. Robert Lowry, I'm tired of the engagement farmers on all social media, all totally full of BS. Yes, that's what I'm noticing is people who are almost giddy to have a new topic to farm for engagement. It's like, this is a war. People are dying. Slow down. Slow down your anger, your speech, all of it. So that's my convoluted thoughts. Thanks for helping me try and organize them by verbalizing them. If it doesn't make sense, you can help me out by asking me a question or helping me to explain something better. There are very few things I know about this conflict other than I know this. And so I'm very comfortable saying this. There's no excuse ever, ever for raping, murdering, torturing innocent civilians, and anybody who is putting a paratrooper logo on their flags or signage or their profiles is either a very evil person or so misguided they're idiotic and not worth listening to. Here's an example of such a thing. Uh, I saw this. This is from a teacher, a public high school teacher. Dave Riverboy shared this. Public high school teacher in Queens. If you look at his profile, he says, public high school teacher, New York City, hashtag Free Palestine, hashtag BDS, hashtag BLM, of course, hashtag Lifta. And his cover photo is this paratrooper thing. I stand with Palestine. No, you don't stand with Palestine. If you're putting that paratrooper thing on there, you stand with terrorism. You stand with terrorists. You're saying one thing, but you're displaying an image that means something else. So that's evil. I know that much. No reason to do that ever. That's the one thing I'm confident about saying. So Davina, just a bunch of loud extremists, a very small minority. I don't know about that though, because I've been watching these protests unfolding. I'm sure you guys have as well in London and Germany and here in the US, and I'm a bit shocked by the size of some of these protests. So I don't know how much of a minority it is. I mean, it's definitely a minority. I just don't know if it's a very small minority. Like it's not like it's not 1%. I don't know, 10%, 20? I don't know. Here. Let's pull this up. I'm gonna add this to the screen. This is the protest in London.
Because I'm a human being. No civilized nation on earth would agree that depriving children of food and water is acceptable. I'm here because I'm a human being, and anyone with a conscience believes that a civilian population should never be punished in this way. It's collective punishment. It's a war crime. And unless we stop it, unless we get out there and say something, it's going to end up with thousands losing their lives.
Can you put into words how you feel about the loss of life on both sides?
Every life is precious. But the root of this violence is the occupation. It's not complicated.
Okay. That's where she lost me. No. I don't know that. I'm not going to say that. The root of this is the occupation. The root of this is Israel's fault. No. We just saw terrorists slaughter innocent Israelis. No. You're not going to blame that on the victim. That's my problem with a lot of these protests. They're not simply peace protests. If they were simply peace protests, fine. A lot of them are blame the victim protests, anti-Israel protests. No.
It's a settler colonial state imposing apartheid and oppression on an indigenous people. And that's wrong everywhere, for anybody. And it has to be true that all the Palestinians want is...
Wait, what is it they want?
Freedom.
Freedom? That may be true for the people who live there. I don't think that's necessarily true for the people in power, for their leaders. Here's one of the things that I did learn this week. I don't know if you guys already knew this, but I didn't. So I've been reading more about the history of the area, holding my tongue, trying to read more. If somebody has more knowledge on this area than me, feel free to drop some info in the chat, but I wanted to share this info with you. I looked this up, I verified it. It's not just some random dude on Twitter. This guy Tigger's Dan says, honestly, this is a simple way to think about it. Jews were always present in that land. That the only reason that's important is because they're using this woke leftist colonialist language. They're calling people colonialists, and they're talking about indigenous populations. Well, if you're going to talk about indigenous, if that's what we're discussing, that you're basing your claim that who deserves to be there is if they're indigenous or not, and that's how you determine who's the colonialist and who's not. Well, if you're going to do that, you have to go back far enough in history. You can't just say I'm going to start history at this point. Like, and so this guy has a point. Okay, if we're making claims based on whether a population is indigenous or not, well, it's not very clear because Jews were also always present in that land. So he continues, the population varied, but Jews were essentially always part of the land. We don't consider Native Americans not indigenous because at certain points there were only a few living in the land. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, the British got the land from the Ottomans. The British eventually decided to create a commission to fairly divide up the land so both peoples could live in their own states. This is the Peel Commission, and I looked this up. I was reading more about the Peel Commission, which I encourage you guys to do. This is the Peel Commission's picture below, which grants the vast, or it would have granted the vast majority to Arabs for a Palestinian state. It was accepted by the Jews and rejected by the Arabs. It was accepted by the Jewish people or the Jewish leaders. It was rejected by the Arab leaders. So you can see that it's actually, now this is this person's opinion, the greed of Arab leadership and the denial of sovereignty to an indigenous population, the Jews, that where this went wrong. So this is an opinion right here I'm highlighting. You can complicate this picture, but I think it only takes you further from the truth. So I don't need to get into this person's opinions. I don't know if I agree or disagree about the greed and whose fault, and I'm not pointing fingers or claim to say anything is anyone's fault. I just didn't realize that this was offered. You can see here the pink. This was in 1937, the partition scheme of the Peel Commission. This is what Britain proposed. This little green part was going to be where Jerusalem is located. That was going to be mandated. That was going to be British control here. The little orange part up here at the top, that was going to be for the Jewish people. And then all of this pink land here was going to be the Arab state. So the Jewish state, the Arab state, and this little green part. Much larger portion of land and everything for the Arab state, much larger than the part that we're talking about now. But they rejected it. That's a good part of history to know about during all this. I didn't know about that, so I'm sharing it with you in case you didn't know. Texas sheep lady. The Palestinians said no because they wanted no Jews. Well, that seems to be what I'm hearing, which is why that's why they rejected it in 1937. Hey, Force of Light. Thanks for hanging out. Good to see you. I'm going to be seeing Michelle from Force of Light on Wednesday. I should have told you guys. I told you in the last video. But we are going to have another one of our Christian panels, a discussion on Wednesday at 6 o'clock Central Time here on Deprogrammed. It's going to be myself, Michelle from Force of Light, Brahma Bull, possibly Odin. Odin's going to try to make it from FNT and Odin's Movie Blog. And then special guest Gothics is going to be here for that panel. And we're going to be reviewing and discussing the film Jesus Revolution. So if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, you should watch it now. Go watch Jesus Revolution if you want to be here for that. So good to see you, Michelle. Let's continue with what this woman is saying. I just had to interrupt her and point that out since she was using that language about colonialism and who's indigenous, and it's like, well, actually, I don't know. It's not entirely true what you're saying. And if you're going to base something and if you're going to base your argument in about who deserves to be there on who was indigenous, then you need to go back really far in history. You can't just start it somewhere in the middle.
It has to be true that all the Palestinians want is freedom. And we must support that in equal rights. And I stand up here, I'm so pleased to see so many of my brothers and sisters with big hearts who know the truth. And the Western media has a duty now to tell the truth about what's happening, because I am seeing the worst horrors I could ever have imagined. I grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust, and we said never again, and that means never again for anyone. And I think of anyone, if they have a conscience, get out there and speak and demand your leaders speak.
There seem to be, of course, deep divisions on either side, but you've come out today and you were telling me earlier that this is about being a human, a fellow human being.
I'm so thrilled to be here among my brothers and sisters who can see the truth, despite all the propaganda and the lies and the bias and the prejudice that we see in the Western media. It has been, quite frankly, an appalling week.
What would you like to see the UK government do now?
They must demand a ceasefire. They must demand that Israel stop bombing children and stop burying them under rubble. They must demand a humanitarian corridor so aid and medical supplies can get in. They must demand they have electricity. They must demand that there is food and water.
Okay, let's look at a different perspective. We heard from her. I did see this on Libs of TikTok. I can't tell. Is that on the screen? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Libs of TikTok said, "Welcome to London. You can chant for the genocide of Jews." And by the way, that was happening at some of these protests. There was incitement to violence at some of these protests. She says, "You can chant for the genocide of Jews, but if you use the wrong pronouns, you can go to prison." And so she's got this article here from yesterday. Labour Party is going to make misgendering a crime in Britain with up to 2 years in prison. And then contrasting that with this headline, pro-Hamas protesters in London engage in a chant in favor of the genocide of Jews. That woman that we just heard from at the protest in London, I think her blind spot is that there is a lot of this happening among people that she's out there protesting with, and there's not enough condemnation from her for this. I always feel like you need to be more critical of your own quote unquote side, of your own tribe, your own people, because first of all, that's what you know, and also it's the way you hold your side to account, like, and hold yourself to account. So, for example, I don't know, I get more upset when I feel like it's more important to call out, let's take woke as an example. Woke in the church, woke among Christians makes me the most upset because you're a Christian, you're using God to cloak this evil ideology, and it needs to be rooted out there. Like, that's one of the greatest offenses. And another example, as someone who used to was in the woke left for 2 decades and who speaks about the evil of woke ideology now, sometimes I heard, especially at the beginning, I would hear people saying, "Why aren't you criticizing such and such on the right? Why aren't you criticizing XYZ, extremism on the right?" It's like, because I didn't come from there. I don't know about it. Like, it's not as, I'm criticizing my side. That's what I'm doing. That's what I know. That was really common at the beginning. So I do think it's a red flag that she's not addressing this at all. It's sort of this the worldview that she's presenting on it is very one-sided, black and white. There's an oppressor and there's the oppressed. And I question anybody who presents things like that to me now, where it's like, everything is this oppressor's fault, even when individuals who live in that country are slaughtered and tortured and raped and murdered. It's still the oppressor's fault. That just reminds me too much of social justice and woke, the way it operates in the West with, the way it operates along lines of race, where they say things like, it's impossible to be racist towards a Black person. It doesn't matter. They don't look at the individual actions of people and say you're responsible for this. They just look at group status. And it seems to me that's what she's doing. So here, I'm going to pull this up as well. And then we can move away from this topic if you want. I just felt like I have a lot of conflicting thoughts about it, and it's okay that you do, and you don't have to have strong opinions and make pronouncements, and especially if you have a modest following, I think. So, let's see. I'm trying to pull this one up. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. This one is from Andy No. And this one was here in the US. I guess this is what I'm most distressed about in some ways, in terms of what's happening here at home. The reaction here in the United States is seeing the large numbers of people who were out in the streets. It's not just like the people that we've talked about who are on social media who are quick to anger and quick to speak, but there are people who are quick to like get out in the streets with a flag and a sign. And I think if you could update that verse, not that you should, but if you could update that Bible verse, it would say, and be slow to anger, slow to speak, and slow to protest. like really consider it before you're out there. So here, let me turn the volume on this. As you can see here, Andy says this was from San Diego, California. A mob is excited to stomp on an Israeli flag at a Palestine protest in San Diego. This is not a peace rally. That's not what this is. That's why I'm showing some of these, because they keep trying to say, like that woman we heard from in the first clip, I'm at a peace rally. This is not a peace rally. What's happening here? This is the madness of crowds. This is the madness of wanting a war. You're picking a side and stomping on it, and did you hear what she said? She's talking about the journalist, and she's yelling, cover his camera, cover his camera. They're gonna call us savages. Maybe, if the shoe fits. They're gonna call us savages.
Cover their camera.
So then another guy yells, they're the savages, they're the animals. And then he says, Israeli Zionist pigs.
Cover their cameras! Cover their cameras! Cover their cameras! Keep moving! Go back to the ground! Don't move!
It's going to escalate. Stop hitting me. Stop hitting me.
All these people should be taking Jordan Peterson's advice. I think they should be home making their bed. None of these people look like they are the kind of person who's done a lot of reading and research and contemplation on what their position is. I think they're all motivated by the spirit of emotion, or possessed by the spirit of emotion, and whatever amount, whether small or big, of good intent that they have it's drowned out by the way in which they choose to behave. Like, it's overshadowed by them being out in the street like savages, stomping on flags and thinking they're on the right side of history. So, should they be allowed to protest as long as they're not inciting violence? Yes. But should they choose to? I think they would be better off to choose to stay home and make their bed. Andrew, don't look like they've cleaned their room in ages. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Can you imagine these are the people. It's kind of my joke earlier about people getting their opinions on what's going on in Israel right now from I don't know, like drama tubers and stuff. It's similar, but who are we going to look to tell us what should be done right now in the Middle East? Does that group of people look like they're good to go to? That their opinion should be considered? I don't think so. Steven Landau. Hey, Steven. Thank you for the $20 super chat. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. He says, a simple question you can ask the Muslim countries: where are all of your Jews? Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, etc. had hundreds of thousands of Jews until the early 1900s, but the Jews were systematically driven out, so there are none left. Thank you for that. Thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the pointing that out, asking the question. Hey, Pirate. Pirate's here. Sorry I'm late. I've been catching up on the NFL. Hey, I know more about the NFL today than I've known in years, because our German guest is still with us, and he's a big fan of American football. And yesterday, his team, the Browns, won, and I know that because he was very excited, and I guess they don't win that often. So that's what I know about the NFL today. Texas Sheep Lady says, chanting from the river to the sea is calling for the death of all Jews. That's true. That is incitement to violence. Here, I'm going to show. I know I said we would pivot away from this topic next, but I did want to show one more of these videos. Okay. This is another example. There are lots of examples of this right now. This is another example of what's happening at some of these protests and the opinions of the people there. This is why I say these are not peace protests. I'm sure some people are there for peace. Yes, absolutely. But what percentage of them are there for peace, and what percentage of them are there to support terrorism? Here. This is also from Andy No. A woman wearing rifle earrings at a Palestinian protest in Canada says, well, let's hear what she says.
Hamas is not a terrorist group.
Oh, it isn't, ma'am.
First of all, Hamas is not a terrorist group.
Okay,
Hamas is
well,
not a terrorist group.
What is it, like a motorcycle club?
It is a resistance that has been fuming for 75 years.
So she says Hamas is not a terrorist group, that it's just a resistance. This is the Orwellian use of language to change and manipulate your perception. This is a great example of it. They're just a resistance group. They're just resisting. How are they resisting? With terrorism. but it's just resistance. Okay, but they're using terrorism. Like, that makes them a terrorist group. Like, they're using terror. What are they doing? Oh, they're just resisting. What does that mean? Can you get specific about what resisting means? Oh, they're parachuting into music festivals and slaughtering innocent women and children and pulling people out of their homes, raping them, torturing them, parading them through the streets bloodied. Like, that's just resisting. It's not. It's not. What they're doing is terrorism. There's no justification for it. None.
Of colonialism, of occupation, fuming for 75 years of colonialism, of occupation, of murder, of rape, of little children, of women. That's what they are. They are resistant.
Yeah. Again, if you oppose that stuff, then you don't support it when it's Hamas doing it. You don't.
Do you think Canada is a colonialist country too?
Everything that they do is justified.
Including what happened last week?
Every single thing they have done is justified.
Ma'am, there were
Yeah, she said that. He even asked her, are you talking about what they did last week? Is that justified? She says every single thing.
Single thing they have done is justified.
Ma'am, there were children murdered. There were babies beheaded.
Babies beheaded, really? Please educate yourself.
Well,
Please check the news, because as a news reporter, you gotta check the fucking news, because they said that shit was fake. Okay, multiple times, different channels, different even.
I saw people going in the weeds on this. This relates to one of my points earlier about being slow to share things during a time like this, because you could be sharing war propaganda, but also being slow to also, on the flip side, being slow to immediately call things war propaganda if you don't know. I mean, I think the best thing is like, hey, don't spread it at all. Like, hey, wait and see what the answer is. And I saw people on both sides just like chomping at the bit to like, let me share this thing that may or may not be true that I personally was skeptical about, but didn't say anything because why? Again, I'm skeptical about a lot of things without needing to put it out there. So many people are just jumping at the bit to say, I've got to put something online. I've got to tell people my take on this thing. No, maybe you should sit and wait and see what happens. So I did the same thing with Jussie Smollett. I was skeptical immediately, but I stayed quiet and I waited to see what happened, because I think that's I think that's the better thing to do, rather than to inflame emotions in any direction. So that was something people like started fighting about, and then all of Twitter became about that, whether that story about beheaded babies was true or not. And at the end of the day, it's a distraction. Could it be war propaganda? Could it not? It could be, it could not. I don't know. They still killed babies. They still killed women and children. We have seen the things that are not fake that we know are true, and there's no justification for them. So what you've done is allow this thing over here to become a red herring, to become a straw man that people like this who support terrorism can point to and then say it's all fake news because that possibly could be propaganda that way. It doesn't matter. This over here that we know happened is enough to say there's no justification for all the things that we know happened. There's no justification for it. So to see people arguing about whether or not that one story was true or false, I was just like, what is happening? Be more responsible. With a modest following comes hopefully more than a modest amount of responsibility. Be more responsible about how quickly you share things that could be propaganda. I'm saying this to myself as well. I'm saying it because I think about it all the time to try and keep myself in check. Other people need to do that too. Like, be more responsible about what you share and be more responsible about the skepticism that you share. Give it all a little bit of time, just a little bit.
Okay, multiple times, different channels, different, even Biden himself, his ministers and his idiots said himself that news was fake.
So-
There's no 40 beheaded babies.
And there
You
were
have
no
proof.
1,300 deaths
There's
in
no
Israel?
Evidence. There's no evidence. There's no photos whatsoever. Hamas is a Muslim group. They would never do that because it's against Islam. That's number one. And that's something that they show.
Do you really believe that?
There is evidence of Israeli women saying that they gave us water, they gave us food, they gave us a place to sleep.
We've seen videos. I don't know if you've watched them, but I personally have seen the video of the one woman that they took hostage, and she's walking. They parade her down the street while spitting on her, and the back of her pants is covered in blood because she's been violated many times. So, yeah, that's not fake.
Comfortably. They gave us clothes. They got them to cover up out of respect. This is actual women having interviews talking about when they were hostages or when they were taking in, when Hamas members were coming into their house. These are actual Israeli women saying this is how they were. Even at some point, a Hamas fighter told one of the women, "Can I have a banana to eat?" He asked if he could eat.
I think this stuff is like also a really good psychological study. Like a lot of the problems that we see in the world, almost all of them, you can break it down and look at individuals and see how human psychology is affecting things, is in the way. This woman, for example, I don't know if she really believes all this stuff or not, but she seems to. Is it possible she's convinced herself that they're like really good guys and they would never do that? And is it possible she's convinced herself of that? Yeah. Could an otherwise intelligent person, she seems reasonably intelligent otherwise, could an otherwise intelligent person be deluded enough to convince themselves of this? Yes. Absolutely. How do you do that? You form your opinion through emotions. Jonathan Haidt talks about this in the book, The Righteous Mind. A lot of us, it's a human thing to make up our mind emotionally and then to try and justify it rationally. So you get there emotionally first. Then you cherry pick things that support your position or that help build up your emotional opinion that these are good guys and the other guys are bad guys. So look at all the things she's cherry picked that she's ready to tell you about to help support her position. She's got them all ready. Anything that doesn't support her position, like the video of the woman with the blood on the back of her pants who's being paraded through the streets, that's not going to be listed. That's going to be ignored. It's not just to sway other people. I really think it's to sway themselves that humans do this. I saw something, let me take this off the screen. Here's a great example. This is a different topic, but it's a great example of what I'm talking about. There was a shooting at the Texas State Fair this weekend in Dallas. It was a conflict between two individuals. It was not a mass shooting. The media irresponsibly reported, mass shooting. In some cases, they used that phrase. It was two guys who got into a fight. From what I understand, one shot the other and hit some bystanders in the process. But when you say mass shooting, you make people think there's a lunatic there trying to pick people off and actively doing so. And that wasn't what was happening. And there is a difference, and it does matter because you incite mass fear when you say mass shooting. And also because later on they use the definition, they use instances of mass shooting to convince people that a certain type of killing is happening a lot more than it is. And so there was a shooting at the Texas State Fair this weekend. And before the news was even a couple of hours old, there were people on X, including a Dallas council member, who were saying this is a result of open carry in Texas. This is a result of permitless carry. That's what one of the council members said. Permitless carry. Greg Abbott, do something. We need gun control, they were saying. We need gun control. This is because we have permitless carry. This is because they have open carry at the fair. Like, they were saying all kinds of things. And a couple of these people I responded to, and without shaming them, without, insulting them, just saying, actually, no, here's the state fair policy, and people can't take a simple correction. Why? It's that psychological block I'm talking about. They've already made up their mind emotionally. Okay. Then they're trying to amass facts or things they think are facts to support that. If you show them that one of those facts is actually wrong, even if you do so without emotion, even if you do so without shaming them, and you say, hey, actually, here's the state fair policy. They did not allow, it specifically says they don't allow open carry at the fair. It also specifically says only licensed firearm holders are able to carry there, and they have to, license to carry concealed. That's the only people allowed in the fair. Even if you point that out and you say, like, to the council member, hey, you should correct your tweet. Permitless carry had nothing to do here with this shooting because the fair doesn't allow permitless carry. It doesn't allow it. So take that out of what you're saying. Correct the record of what you're saying. This isn't the fault of permitless carry. Even if you show them that and say, actually, you're wrong. Here's the fair policy. They require, a license, and it's only licensed handgun owners. Even if you show them that. Well, that's just semantics. Here are some of the answers I got. Well, that's just semantics. Or, thanks a lot, Karen. You've really added to the discussion. People just get personally upset that they got a fact wrong because they have this psychological problem where they've built everything around being right, or they can't tolerate having been wrong about one fact, and it's bad. That's a bad thing, because it means that when you get a new fact, you immediately disregard it instead of adopting it into your house of knowledge. You throw it out and you keep the house the way it is. And if you don't have all the facts in your house of knowledge, your house is going to be built all wonky. Like, like, you should take that new brick or what it is and say, oh, let me put that in here and percolate on that for a while. Because maybe it'll change your opinion over time. Maybe it won't. But to completely disregard it means no facts are going to get in if they disagree with the emotional opinion you already have. This woman we just watched who says, everything Hamas does is justified. They're good guys. Everything they do is fine. They're just resistance fighters. They would never harm a woman or a baby. That's not what they do. That woman has disregarded so many facts. If she actually believes that, she's had to disregard facts so that she can keep that belief, that house of belief. But what would happen if she took some of those facts and said, okay, I still feel emotionally, my opinion is that I want to support this Hamas. Like, what if she were to say that, but still incorporate those facts? Okay, put those bricks in her house of knowledge, and over time, maybe her opinion would shift. That doesn't happen. People get personally offended. I've done this too. I've gotten personally offended when I find out I'm wrong about something. And I try to root that out of me because that's stupid. A fact, being wrong about a fact, is nothing to feel ashamed about or like you're a bad person. The thing to be ashamed about is if you reject the fact once you learn it. That's the thing to be ashamed about, is how you deal with it when you learn that you're wrong about something. When you learn that you're wrong about something, do you take that new knowledge? Do you respond with humility? Does it make you more humble? Like, oh, I got that wrong. Even if it feels uncomfortable to be wrong about something. Humble yourself. It's good for you. It's good for me to feel that uncomfortableness when you're wrong about something, because it should be a learning lesson where it's like, oh, next time, like in the case of the Texas shooting and the people being wrong about the law, somebody said to me also, they called me, you dummy or you idiot or something like that. They said, you dummy, it doesn't matter what the fair policy is. They can't enforce it because Texas is a permitless state. Actually, no. Let's look at the law. I responded. I was like, no, you're actually wrong. Here's the law. Read the law. And it says there explicitly, private property can determine if they require a permit or not. Like a private property gets to decide. They get to decide. So here's the fact. And they go, wow, that's just semantic. Or they can't accept that. That's what you should properly do in that situation is go, wow, I feel super uncomfortable, embarrassed, or whatever the bad feeling is. I feel really bad because somebody showed me I was wrong about something online, or they gave me a fact that I had wrong. They gave me a new fact, a new brick from a house of knowledge. They gave that to me, and I feel really bad and embarrassed. So the proper response is, in the future, it's a learning opportunity. In the future, it's like, hey, maybe next time I will, before I say something that I think is true, I'll confirm that it's true. I'll go to the source. I'll look at the law before I say something like that. I've had to do this before. It's good for you because every time you have to do that, you want to do it less and less, and so you become slower to speak. You become more circumspect. You interrogate yourself more. You make sure that you are speaking from a place of actual facts, like not just, hey, I believe this is what the law is, but I'm going to go look and confirm the law before I say this thing. That's a good practice. But what is shameful is when you learn a new fact or you find out you were wrong or somebody corrects you. It's not shameful to have the wrong fact or to be wrong. It's not. It's shameful when you learn that you were wrong or you had the wrong fact. It's shameful to double down, to throw the fact out, to disregard it, to try and minimize it. That's what's shameful. And that's how you become a person who has insulated yourself from all truth, all facts. If you do that over and over enough times, you become like this woman who seems like an otherwise intelligent person, but is standing there saying things that we know are factually untrue. And you're like, how could she believe that? Because over time, she's had to disregard so many facts to keep that belief that Hamas are good guys. If you're still following along, help me know if I made I'm articulating things that are swirling around in my head, and it's my first time trying to do so with this. So let me know if I'm unclear or if I could say that better. Sometimes you guys say things much more succinctly than I do in the chat. So, yeah. Hey, John. John's been a member for 5 months. Thank you, John. He says, hail chat. Good to see you. Hopefully I'll see you if you're around tonight. I'm going to be on Toxic Femme. Cool. Okay. That's probably enough of that one woman. Andy No has been putting out a lot of footage. I told you I'm spending a lot of time just reading about all this and watching videos and, listening to others. So, Andy's been putting out a lot of videos if you're not already following him. Here's another one. So he says, watch the moment that a convoy of Palestine protesters arrived outside Parliament in London on October 14th to celebrate the victories of the, quote, resistance. Again, like this woman just did in the previous clip, saying Hamas, they're just resistors. They are terrorists also. So what you're celebrating is terrorism. It's like they won a football game. That's how they're treating the murder and rape and torture of innocent civilians. What a world. Right? All of this being said, being frustrated with the state of the world, of the reactions that we're seeing in the West, all of that being said, what I said at the beginning is true. I still have a peace and a calmness that I didn't have before I was a believer. And I'm very grateful for my faith for that reason. And I see some people who are uh, maybe a little more online than they have been before, or unable to unplug from all the news, and I think that's really unhealthy. And your life goes on despite human atrocities and human evils, and you know, you should be able to unplug from everything that's happening. It's not selfish in a bad way to continue living your life. In fact, it's the best thing you can do, is to be a healthy person in the world and continue living your life and not spend all of it online, getting wrapped up in a war that you can't control on the other side of the world. One of my friends and fellow podcasters who I had on the show recently, Josh Slocum, who's an atheist, I saw he posted something the other day that I agreed with. And I guess maybe we could close this out by me sharing this, because I think it relates to a lot of what we've been talking about. And this, I think, I'm not sure if he's at first when I read this, I thought he was talking about what's going on in the West in general and woke ideology and culture. But then I realized afterwards maybe he was specifically talking about what's happening in Israel. It doesn't matter. I agree with him, whichever way he meant it. Here's what he said. And again, this is coming from an atheist. He says, "It seems to me that we may be in a historical cycle that we can't stop, if we ever could. I'm not sure about that, but I'm tempted to try for some acceptance, not apathy. Not apathy. What do you think?" Yes. Yes. As a Christian, like a Christian perspective on this, I think is yes, yes. And like keep going, because I think this is the right path. Uh Acceptance. And I love that he separated it from apathy and said not apathy. And this made me think about so many things, and I responded and shared some things with him. But number one, now this is going to sound trite to some people, because you may have heard, even if you're not in, you may have heard that this is something that's said in AA, and it is, but it's real and it's true. And this is what he's saying here is like, yes, you need to learn to accept the things you can change and the things you can't change, and to know the difference. And again, that sounds trite, but it's very real and it's very true. And I think a lot of humans psychologically, we get wrapped up in thinking that we can control everything, or wanting to control everything. And you can't. We're not God. We're not gods. We're not God. We're humans. A lot of times in AA, they say that the real problem of everyone that's in AA is actually not alcohol. Some people say this. They say alcohol is the symptom. It's the symptom in this case, but the real problem is control. That's why I think AA would be great for everyone because I think this is a human condition, and sometimes people they try and find different solutions to that condition of wanting to be in control of things. And for some people it's alcohol. But yes, I absolutely agree with him that that we need to reach a state of acceptance about things, and that does not mean apathy. That does not mean not caring. Acceptance means accepting that I can control some things, I can't control others. In my sphere of impact, I was talking about this with someone again at church yesterday, and he said this, and I completely agree with him. My sphere of impact is limited. We are little tiny people. We in the scope of the universe, of God. In our own life, in our own mind, I mean, our ego, we are the most important. We are the star of the movie, okay? But we're not. I hate to break it to you. We're not. We are little tiny. And the things we can impact for most people, for almost everyone, unless you reach a position of you know, evil villain like Bill Gates. Unless you reach that position, you know, like Dr. Evil or Bill Gates or Fauci. Unless you get that, for most of us, what we can impact is in our daily life. This goes back to the Peterson thing about cleaning your room, you know, making your bed. Take care of the things that you have control over. Start small. Start at the very smallest and then get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the things I can have an impact on my personal life, most people avoid that entirely, I think, especially people who call themselves activists. They have sometimes the most effed up personal lives. Everything's a mess. Okay. You have to get that. That's got to be the number one priority, is get that under control. Figure out how you're going to live and be in the world as a human being. The best way to live and be in the world. It should be the most important thing at all times, no matter what's happening in the world, is you know what you believe. You're confident in your belief system. You know what you believe are the best things to do. In my case, I believe it's God, my husband, family, which I'm trying for. Like, those are important things for me. At any time, working on our life together, figuring out our home, taking something old and making it new again, renovating it, creating, cultivating. Maybe for you, it's gardening, feeding your family, knitting, crafting, making beautiful things, doing art. That's like always over here. That's always the most important. Getting that in order first. You have control over that, or more control over it than you do other things. And then if you get that, like, figured out, and then you get a little bit bigger, or, you know, at least you know how to work on that no matter what's coming up and problems are arising, but you're working on it. And then a little bit bigger than that, if you step out your sphere of impact, it could be on the people you meet and interact with. And in my case, that happens to be people I meet out in the world doing my gig jobs, you know, going to church, being a pretty approachable person out in public and meeting new people all the time. I can have an impact with those people. I had a great conversation with some stranger this weekend. Great conversation with someone who's kind of a woke adjacent lefty. So you can impact people that way. In my case, also because I do this podcast and try to articulate these ideas online, I can also have an impact with people online, and I have. That's amazing. If even one person has seen the interviews I've done on other channels or the things I'm trying to get across here on Deprogrammed, if they see it and it means something to them and it causes them to think about something or realize they're not alone or whatever the thing, that's success. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for every single person who tells me, you helped me figure this thing out, or you helped me realize I wasn't alone, or to articulate this thing I was thinking, or you helped me to wake up, or, any those things mean the world. And I think every individual person matters. Or you helped me open my mind to God, the possibility of God. That's the most important, meaningful thing that I think you can do. And so that's within your sphere of impact. But beyond that, in terms of like being able to stop a war or to reverse the course of ideology like woke, you have to reach a place of acceptance of like, I can have an impact, but it's in these areas that we've talked about, the personal and then the sphere outside of that, the people you interact with and talk to, whether in person or online. Like that's my sphere of impact. And can I have an influence? Absolutely. With individuals. That's the way I view it. And if your light is on, to use a biblical metaphor, if your light is on and that helps someone else's light come on, and they help someone else's light come on, like that's what you can do. But should you accept that you may not be able to prevent a war or prevent the government from screwing people over or prevent woke from getting worse? Yeah, you have to accept that. You're not God. So I absolutely agree with him. And it's very freeing. Another thing I'm grateful for with my faith is it's very freeing because it's like God is in control. That's what I believe. Not me. Can I get up and work towards good every day or try to? Yes. Is part of that getting my house in order and my personal life in order every day and holding myself to account every day? Yes. So I recommended to Josh here because I think he's right on with what he's saying, and he made me think of this sermon. So I'm going to end with this. Why is it YouTube is like, try to get YouTube Premium? No, go away. I don't know what's happening. Okay, go away. Here we go. I'm going to link this below because I think everyone should watch this sermon if you're thinking about these kind of things. In here, I'll just put it on screen. And if you'd rather read it, I know the transcript, YouTube has they do an automatic kind of transcript thing, and you can see the transcript below the video. Or my friend Kristen is now transcribing all of our pastors' sermons and putting them on our Substack. And so you can look at the Church on the Square, Bradley Helgerson's Substack, and you can read the text of his sermons, which is great if you prefer to hear things that way. Okay. Here, this is the video. It's called The Curse of Vanity. And it took me a while to find this because sometimes the way the sermons are titled, I can't remember. There's I'm looking for a certain sermon. That's why I'm glad that they're transcribing them now so people can go and read through them and look for keywords. But this sermon, you can find it on the Church on the Square's YouTube page, and I'm going to link the link to the sermon below. This sermon's great, and it's about Ecclesiastes. And if you haven't read the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a lot of stuff in there about futility. And it's basically like, why have I toiled and done all this stuff? Because I'm going to, it's about apathy versus acceptance. That's a good way to put it. And he's like, is all of my work in vain? Is it all futile because I'm going to pass away? And, all the money and wealth I've acquired where does that go in the end? And it's this whole thing about coming to terms with the like how small we are, right? That we're not the star of the movie. Guess what? God is. That's the Christian way of putting it, I think. My attempt to describe it. Anyway, it's about the book of Ecclesiastes, and you get to see that humans have wrestled with this throughout history. And at the end of this sermon, there's a real move towards hope, despite all of that, towards hope and joy and truth and light, instead of towards apathy. And I really recommend that you watch this, because my pastor is so articulate, so smart, very thoughtful, puts a lot of time into his sermons, and they often stick with me. And you can see this one was uploaded 3 months ago. I'm not sure when he gave this sermon. It may have been even may have been longer ago than that. But I'm still thinking about this one, and it relates to everything we're talking about, and letting go of the idea that you can control everything, although you have to fix everything. When it comes to woke, for example, I think, and I've thought for a long time, that it's going to get worse. We're still not at the tail end. Like, things are starting to change. There's a real resistance building, but it's still going to get worse. Things are going to get hard, and they may have to get really hard for the majority of the population to wake up. And that sucks. And I hope that the resistance builds enough that we can prevent things from having to get that bad. I hope, but it might have to get that bad. Things might have to get really bad for the majority to wake up. That's an acceptance over, that's an acceptance of, I am one person. I cannot control everything. So here, I'm going to put this in the chat, and I'm going to put it in the description of this video. I'll edit it right after. But that's it. That's my jumbled thoughts today. Thanks for sticking around with me. Thanks for sharing your thoughts in the chat. I've been reading some of them. Bungalow Logic says, leave the lights on, Keri. My dad would say, we aren't made of money. Good night, Mister says, Keri, I've already told you I'm saving space for you and your family in the bunker, so you're all good. Thank you, sir. Thank you for saving space for me in the bunker. Adam, be a light in a dark age. Yes. That's the one thing you can do in who you are, your daily life, the way you choose to live, your family. Like, that's the one thing that you have the most degree of influence over. You don't have, even on that, 100% influence. You don't. Tragedy happens, evil happens, medical issues happen, all kinds of things happen. But that's the sphere in which you have the most degree of power, control, influence. Okay, guys, I think it's time to wrap it up. Dawn says, bye, guys. Have a great week. Okay, let's end this. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Dion, Queen of Quotes. Thank you guys for tuning in. Today is Monday, so tonight I'm going to be on Toxic Femme on Midnight's Edge, and I believe that starts at 7 Central Time. So if you're around and want to hang out tonight with the ladies, I'll be there. And Wednesday, I'll say again, we have another one of this will be our third, that Christian panel. That's going to be on Wednesday at 6:00 Central. And that's with Michelle from Force of Light and Brahma Bull, possibly Odin from FNT and Odin's movie blog, and special guest Gothics. So we'll be reminding you about that, but I hope to see you on Wednesday. And thank you guys. Oh, Brahma sent a super chat. Oh, I'm sorry. Brahma Bull. I just did. Yay, Brahma Bull. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Don't forget to let everyone know about the new show coming this Wednesday night, 6 Central, and our fantastic special guests. Yes, special guest Gothics. And I'm going to, Brahma, if you're still around, you may not be listening. I'm going to send you a draft of the artwork today so we can put it out and let people know 2 days in advance that we're going to be doing that. So thank you guys so much. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for the super chat, Brahma. I hope you have a good one, as they say in Texas and also in other places in America. Have a good one. Okay. Bye.